Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this. I hope this is working better. This is take two because I was trying to do it before and the video wasn't working. So, if anybody can just let me know in the chat if this is working, that would be super because then I will share a little bit more. But my name is Peter. I am a volunteer with Igniting Hope. I did my third year with Steve at BSSM. That was a couple years ago. I did it with Melinda, and that's probably the more common association that some of you may know me through is that I am Melinda's husband. So um, I had been just praying a bit about desperation and um, and just I guess just what that means with the Lord. Sometimes just in my life right now, I'm contending for with in desperation, desperation for just Jesus to show up, for just maybe just a greater infilling of Holy Spirit to just really come into my life. And as I've been praying about this, I'm going to load up some notes here, um, and just really just like searching the Word. I've been trying to give me a second, guys. Been trying to find really just areas in the Bible where there were moments of desperation. Let me see if this is better. And I came across the woman with the issue of blood, right? The bleeding disorder. And good morning, Paul. Thanks for letting me know that we're good here on Facebook. Um, and many of you guys know this story, and it's a popular story, but I'm not quite sure that I appreciated really the desperation of this woman and the context of which it lied in. And I wanted to just share with you a little bit about this story, about this woman, and it's captured in a couple of different parts of the gospel. It's captured in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I just want to focus on kind of Luke here. And so it's chapter 8 and 40. I'm just going to just read through it first, and then we're going to unpack it a little bit, kind of verse by verse. But essentially, what happens is it's just Jesus returned from, and the multitude welcomed him. They were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house. For he had only a daughter about 12 years old, and said she was dying. But then it says, but as he went on his way now to Jairus' house, the multitudes thronged him. And now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately the flow of blood stopped. Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceived power going out of me." And then it goes on. Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people that the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And it's a powerful verse, first of all, of so many different things. But I wanted to start by just maybe giving it a little bit of context, and maybe some of you can relate to this a little bit. I know that I can in my life. Is that here's this gal, and she doesn't just have it's not just a menstrual thing that's going on. It's actually chronic bleeding that she's got this problem with. And it's like it says, we know she's been having it for 12 years, and that number 12, we're going to find out is probably pretty significant. And to give you a little bit of context, what it means in the Hebrew is essentially it means perfect. It's the number of tribes, and it's like the perfect amount. Um, And during this time, when women were living in an old covenant kind of law, essentially. The idea was that when a woman was having any kind of bleeding in an area of menstruation, they were essentially considered impure or unclean. And so they were totally put aside from society. You couldn't touch them, you couldn't touch anything that they touched. I mean, it was really just like a period of isolation until it was all done. But here's a girl who has had this problem for 12 years and it hasn't gone away and it's been persistent. So we know that she's just been totally isolated from society and family and just essentially totally cut off. And you can certainly feel it as you read the scripture that this girl, this woman is truly desperate. She is desperate. She's desperate for healing. She doesn't want to be dealing with this anymore. I'm sure she doesn't want to be isolated. She is wanting just breakthrough in this area, right? And I think that for a lot of us, we come in and out of seasons where we're like, man, I just need breakthrough. I just need, whether it's like maybe in your finances with a family member, in your marriage. It could be in so many contexts, but it's this idea of I have spent all my money on stuff maybe that traditionally should help that isn't helping, and now like I don't know what else to do but to just basically just come to the feet of Jesus and just hope. And so it is just this breakthrough that is filled with hope, because I think that there's a difference between desperation filled with hope, rather than desperation that is like hopeless, right? Like I'm desperate, hopeless desperation. I have no idea, I have no hope. But this girl clearly has hope, and we're gonna get there. And this what's so funny is that passage in the old covenant that talks about this uncleanliness of women when they're in their menstrual cycle comes from Leviticus. But at the very end of the law in Leviticus, where it's talking about how these women are unclean, it ends with Leviticus 15:30, and it says, "Then the priest shall offer the one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before the Lord for the discharge of her uncleanliness." I think it's just interesting that this is really talking about the atonement. This is talking about what Jesus did as the fulfillment of the old prophecy. And here's this woman who is clearly living in a very much an Old Testament law. And I just believe that she's actually taking what the Old Testament says with a new covenant mindset of saying it's happening right now. It's happening right now through Jesus. And that verse right now is that it says the priest shall offer the one, Jesus, the Messiah, as a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement. That Jesus is the priest. Jesus is the Messiah. There's something that she's recognizing a little bit in this process as she sees him walking through the crowd. So as we're going through here, there is certainly this idea of this context of like where she's at. There's also this context of the fact that it says that she was hiding. It says she comes out of hiding. And we know that she's been isolated for a long time. And so here's a woman who probably just isn't feeling that great about ourselves. And oftentimes I think when we're so desperate, and sometimes when we're desperate and we don't have hope, there is this idea of like hiding back, of kind of like pulling ourselves in isolation because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. And her identity, it says that she is nameless and nobody really knows her name and we don't really know much about her. But the funny part is that it's her identity that is so lost in this moment. I mean, she is really, truly is just like desperate just for healing and desperate to be out of this, place of just hiding. But her story is a little bit of a sidebar. And I think that's kind of funny. My daughter last night told me, she said, don't use sidebar, use side quest. And however we say that, it's kind of funny because right before this story, Jesus had delivered the man. This is the one with the legions, and the deliverance goes into the pigs, and the pigs run in the ocean. And then right after this is the story of Jairus' daughter being resurrected, Tabitha. And so in the moment of these two like miraculous testimonies that Jesus performs, here comes this woman with this issue of blood. And I think that sometimes these moments that we experience with Jesus are actually kind of they're the in-betweens, the really, really big ones. And perhaps we just discount them a little bit. And so what I find so interesting in this moment is how does this woman with the issue of blood, this nameless woman with the issue of blood, attach so much hope to her desperation that she says, I just need to touch his garment. And if I touch his garment, then just maybe things are going to be okay. Why does she believe that? Well, what's kind of interesting is that she probably had heard a testimony of this before. Because when you look in Matthew 14, 34 to 36, it says, when they crossed over, they'd come to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent out into all the surrounding region, brought to him all who were sick, and begged him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. As men touched it, were made perfectly well. It's very, very likely this woman with the issue of blood had heard that testimony. And it was that testimony that gave her the hope that maybe if I can just touch the garment of Jesus, then I will be made well. This woman, who she was living in this very old covenant mindset, society, kind of law, but she had a that was rooted in hope. And I've been truly understood that what happened in this Matthew 14 really understood that it was the testimony of the Messiah, of Jesus. That was the spirit of prophecy that it could be done again. And I think that that's an area, like in my life, and I think with other people too sometimes, is that when we are desperate and we have hope, we say, hold on a second. I've heard testimonies. Maybe he's done it in our lives. Maybe he's done it in somebody else's life. Maybe you've heard it preached from somewhere. Maybe you've read it. It doesn't matter. Was it happened somewhere else? I think it can happen again. And that's what I need to hold on to. And that's what I want. So as I've been kind of meditating on this and praying this a little bit more, I had to ask myself, when you hear those testimonies, and whether we read about them or whatever, we hear them, we see them, how do we move from, I don't know if it can happen again, to I really believe that it's going to happen again? I really think that there's a good chance that it's going to happen again. How did she attach so much hope in her desperation to what had happened before in Matthew 14, that it was now going to happen again, and that she was the one who was going to receive the testimony? Well, what we know is that in the Jewish traditions, the men's would wear these prayer shawls. And these prayer shawls were called, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, tallits. And at the end of the prayer shawl were these little, like, kind of woven strands that would go through. And they were called tzitzits. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because in Matthew 14, when it says that they touched his garment, the word for garment is actually prayer shawl. It's actually tallits. And so when it says, both in this verse with the woman with the issue of blood and in Matthew 14, and it says that they touched the garment, really what it was saying was they touched the prayer shawl. And then specifically the little threads that came off the zits. Now, what's funny is that if you grew up in a Hebrew culture, you were very familiar of why people wore these prayer shawls and what the little strands of tzitzits were for. And it's in Numbers 15, 38, 40. And I won't read the whole verse, but it talks about basically, it says to make tassels on the corner of their garments throughout their generations, to put a blue thread in the tassels in the corners. And it basically says, so do that so that you remember and do all of my commandments. So the reason that a lot of the Jewish men would wear these shawls with these little threads, these tzitzits coming off, was to remember the Lord's comments or the commandments, and remember, like, his holiness. And so furthermore, what's kind of interesting then is then if you look at Malachi, right, the last book of the Old Testament, in Malachi 4:2, it actually prophesies over this shawl, this prayer shawl, this tallit and the tzitzits. And what it says is, it says, but to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and shall go out and grow fat like stall-fed calves. Now, it sounds funny, right, to go out and, what does it say? Grow like fat stall-fed calves. But some of the versions will also say the joy of a young calf. It's this idea of really just having the joy of the Lord. Well, so you're wondering, what does this Malachi verse really have to do with anything? Well, here for this woman that was dealing with the issue of blood was that she understood that the little tzitzits that were coming off shawl were actually the the wings that were referred to in this Malachi 4:2. That in Malachi 4:2, when it says the healing in the wings, the word wings actually refers to the kanaf, which can be translated into the corner of the shawl, which is where those little strings came off. So the idea was that there was a tremendous amount of power that was within this prayer shawl because of this verse in Malachi 4:2. So this woman with the issue of blood essentially recognizes that not only is there power in the shawl in the wings from in Malachi, that it talks about the healing is in the wings, that's where she's going to get her healing, is in the wings of this shawl, right? And so it's very interesting because a lot of people have heard the stories about Jesus who is healing so many people, right? He's just like done this massive deliverance, right? Before, and now he's about to go raise somebody from the dead, and everybody knows he is because he's agreed to go there, and they know it's going to happen. And here is this woman, and all she can think about is, I'm going to get my healing if I touch just one of those little threads that comes off of his prayer shawl. And she just has this like desperation and this hope, I find, that is so profound because she's not asking for a prayer. She's not even asking for Jesus to lay hands on her. She's just saying, if I can sneak in and touch that little tiny piece of his prayer shawl, I'm going to get what I need. And I just love this because, because as she's going on with this, she gets so much more. She gets so much more. Sometimes I think we go to Jesus and we say, if I could just have this one little piece, just this one little thing. And what Jesus wants to give you is so, so much more. And this is just a great story of like how that happens. And so when they would make these prayer shawls, which was funny, was that they would actually be kind of a part of a family. It was like a family crest, or those things on rings when they would stamp contracts, and then it was like a family seal. That's how these prayer shawls were. And what they would do is they would have special family knots to make the little tzitz. And so you could actually recognize when you would see a prayer shawl, you'd say, oh, hey, look, that's the little high prayer shawl. And so everybody had like a very unique prayer shawl, even though it was enumerated on how to make it in numbers. The knots were what made it so significant for the different families. The thing about kind of the culture in this time, though, was that it was a very, very private thing. And that you would never, ever touch another person's prayer shawl if you weren't a part of the family, if you weren't married. So if you weren't a son or daughter, if you weren't a husband. And for a woman to touch another man's prayer shawl was absolutely not allowed at all. So when this woman with the issue of blood comes and touches another man's shawl, and there are a lot of people, obviously, some who believe that he's a Messiah and some that don't, and some that are maybe like on the fence and they just want to kind of witness what's going to happen and they just don't know yet. But she comes up and she touches another man's prayer shawl. It's definitely going to raise a lot of eyebrows, let alone the fact that she's got this 12-year thing going on with the chronic bleeding and is considered so uncleansly. So what she is doing, she is going against the grain in ways that like a lot of people would be very, very upset. But what she does is that she sees that Jesus is the fulfillment of this Malachi 4:2. And so she actually believes that it's not just Jesus' prayer shawl, but that Malachi 4:2, that the healing is in the wings, is that the whole idea, everything they've learned about understanding the prayer shawl and the tzitz is Jesus. That is the prophecy. And so when Jesus responds and he says, who touched me? He's acknowledging that the whole concept of how they understand what the prayer shawl and the tzitz means, he doesn't say who touched my talit, who touched my clothes. He says who touched me. And I think it's a very significant moment where essentially what he's saying is I am the fulfillment of this prophecy. I am the fulfillment of this Malachi 4:2. And I think it's so funny because as I'm reading this, I'm just starting to think like, what beliefs for breakthrough in my life are stuck with maybe hopeless desperation? What testimony, prophetic word, maybe promise do I need to be reminded of to be filled with hopeful desperation for my breakthrough, like this woman? And what do I need to believe to attach faith to the truth that the most simple encounter that's maybe bookended by a resurrection and a massive deliverance could be the very moment that I get my greatest breakthrough? This woman with the issue of blood, it looks like, kind of in the midst of all this stuff, it's a pretty simple encounter, right? Um, and we all want an encounter. I mean, who doesn't want an encounter, like a massive encounter, a power encounter, see the face of God, shaking for days, can't get up off the floor. We've heard all those powerful encounters, and they're amazing, and I love them, and I celebrate them, and I want more. I want more of that for sure. But sometimes these encounters don't need to be very complicated. Sometimes they can be so simple. They can be it's just touching a little garment coming off the tallit, his prayer shawl. That's all it took. That's all it took for her, because she believed. Because she had heard all the testimonies before. She had read the word, she knew the word. And she said, no, I believe that simple little thread that's gonna result in my healing because of this Malachi 4 moment, and because this man is the Messiah. It was her belief. It was that idea of the decision she made in her heart to say, this is the Messiah, and I'm gonna believe now that the entire Old Testament points to this one guy, who the Son of Man, who God has sent down, is gonna result in my healing. That is some crazy, hopeful desperation. So whatever area it is in your life, finances, or like I said, family, marriage, it doesn't have to be a monster encounter. I love it that, maybe it is, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I love that sometimes these greatest transformations just come from a simple fear. And it's not a fear like scared, right? But a holy fear, a reverence and awe. And it's so funny because these simple encounters that can transform you for the rest of your life, the ones maybe that, like, sometimes the most powerful encounters in our life are the ones that nobody else knows about. Nobody but maybe like your spouse or somebody who's really close to you that you share that with. It can be the most simplest encounter, but they can be the most transformative moment in your life. And what they do is they create a fear. I believe that this woman, it created a fear, the holy fear, a reverence and awe for Jesus, that she followed him forever. And what's really interesting is we say that she's nameless, but there is a chance. There's a chance that we actually know her name. And there's two. There's one for the Latin and one for the Greek. And her name in Latin would be Veronica, and in the Greek, her name would be Bernice. And she is believed to be the woman who wipes the face of Jesus as he's carrying his cross to the crucifixion. And so this woman, she has this one moment where she's not only healed from bleeding, but she's called daughter. After she touches the shawl, the taboo, she's bleeding, she's uncleansly, she's totally impure. And then she touches the shawl of another man, and he says, daughter. And he basically says, you can touch the shawl. You can touch the shawl because you're my daughter, because you're my family. And then he says, and then the power, he feels the power, the dunamis. He feels the dunamis going through here. How many of you don't want more of Jesus' dunamis? I know I do. And all it takes is just that hope-filled desperation to say, I'm going to go through a crowd. I don't care what it looks like. I'm going to overcome this fear of man to get this filling of dunamis power to walk in an authority of who I am in Christ as a son or daughter of Christ. I think that's the biggest moment. And a lot of us know about that story, about how her identity is restored when he calls her daughter. But the fact that, like, she did it not only because she was unclean, but because of what she touched. And it was so simple. The healing was so simple, and it was so powerful. So, that's about it. That's all I got, guys, but I'll just close this out in prayer here. So Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for those moments in our life when we remember when we first accepted you in our heart. And just like this woman with the issue of blood, when she accepted you in her heart, she made a moment to say, all I need to do is I just need to touch just a little piece of your prayer shawl, and I'm allowed to. So Lord, I just thank you that just we are allowed to touch your prayer shawl and receive just your dunamis power, your Holy Spirit, because we are your son and we are your son and daughters, God. So I just thank you. I thank you not only for the physical healing on this call, and I believe that people are going to hear this and they're going to experience physical healing. I believe that there's a grace right now on this story to for physical healing that's going to happen. I believe that there is a just almost as people are healing this, there's going to be just a fear of the Lord, like this woman who just follows him all the way to his crucifixion and wipes his face to just be totally pure, just like she was. She was considered impure, not morality wise, but just physically. But that there is going to be just an all standing just release of purity that comes out from this call. And I'm just hearing that there's going to be a fresh touch. That some of you, as you're watching this right now, whether you've had an encounter on this call, or maybe perhaps where you've looked back and you've been like, oh my gosh, that was it. That little encounter that maybe I didn't realize, I received just a fresh infilling of his dunamis power. And I believe that there are suddenlies coming. I believe that there are some of you that are just looking for breakthrough, and you're just wondering, oh man, if only this could happen. I believe that they're going to be very quick suddenlies coming in almost the smallest of encounters. The encounters where we might dismiss them and nobody else sees them and nobody knows. But when you share your testimony one day, you'll share, and this is what happened. And no one will know. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I was there. I didn't even know that was going on. But it is going to transform you forever and just ignite a fear, just a holy reverence, a holy awe of God, to just follow him wherever he goes. And you're just going to see him in everything. And I believe that that's what this woman got from that one moment. She got the bleeding healed, and that was amazing. And she got healing, and I love that. But there is so much more that can happen from just touching the most simplest thing and just experience the most simplest encounter. So what might seem like a little sidebar, a side quest in your life as an encounter could be the very thing that just transforms you forever. All right, guys, that's it. We're at the 30-minute mark, and I told myself we're not going over 30 minutes. I love you guys so much. Be praying for you. And it's Labor Day today, so here in the United States. And so have a wonderful, wonderful Labor Day weekend. Love you guys so much, and see you soon. Bye-bye.